Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a reel that was made in Japan, late 70s, early 80s. This has got the Sears 7-digit model number on it. Doesn't have anything more than that, Sears Roebuck. We know that Sears was a reseller, not a manufacturer. So this is what would be referred to as a Japanese trade reel. And well, I haven't seen one quite like this in the body. I've seen one that looks similar. It's called a Carmen, but that's a little bit more of a crest-like face to it. But at any rate, Scott sent this in. It was one of his flea market finds. It's in relatively nice condition. The chrome pieces are bright. There is some wear around the rim, but otherwise, cosmetically, it's nice. It turns very slow. That's probably dried grease or no grease at all. And you want to check your reels before you start the service on them, just to make sure that you identify any problems that you may need to address as part of the service. So I just checked the bail assembly's working. The drags appear to be working, but we'll service those anyway. The reel seems to be very tight. I would call that grease choked. And well, we're going to take this reel apart completely. We'll show you how it was made and how to service one if you happen to have one of these. This has got kind of a mix of the 2 or 3 different old styles. Metal case. It's got an override bar on it that's kind of reminiscent of a Damn Quick, although Quick wasn't made in Japan at that time. At least the Damn Quick ones weren't. Later they became made in Japan. But if you like these kinds of videos and you want to see more, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please use that notification button. It'll let you know when I'm posting. Well, generally what we want to do is we want to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. It doesn't matter which order you take them off in, but what does matter is that you keep track of what it is that you're doing. So we've just removed the drag adjuster button and the spool. I'm going to put the button back in the spool. I'm going to put those pieces into a parts tray. I use the bottom of a fast food container as my parts tray. I would just recommend whatever you do to manage your pieces and parts that you remove, please do it. And keep track of those. And well, when it comes time to service the reel and put it back together again, you'll know where they are. One of the things I'm noticing immediately is that we've lost the line roller here. I tend to save stuff, so I might be able to find one of those. Right now what that's causing is a very loose bail. So we'll service the reel. I'll come back to that, see if I can find one to help Scott out there. The handle should come off by returning it in a clockwise manner. And this one has one where the thread side is on the handle and the stud side is on the main gear. That's okay. Let's take off the side plate here. We'll see what's going on, and we'll determine if it's old grease or no grease. These do appear to be stainless steel screws. There's no rust on them. That's always a nice sign of quality in a reel. And just because it was sold by Sears doesn't mean that it was an inexpensive reel. Sears was just a good outlet for a lot of tackle manufacturers, and they didn't mind making what's called trade reels to keep the volume up. One of the major suppliers to Sears on the domestic side was Ocean City, and on the Japanese side was Daiwa. So just because it says Sears on it doesn't mean it's an inferior product by any stretch of the imagination. All right, we've taken the 3 screws out. We should be able to remove the side plate, and I guess that's the answer we were trying to find out. The answer is it's grease choked. It's just a lot of old grease that's slowing this reel down. When I take the main gear out, I want to put this in the override position so that I do not have an anti-reverse as I go to remove that. The reason for it is that if I take that out with that engaged and I break push the anti-reverse dog out with it, well, I may not ever be able to figure out how it goes back in. Well, there you go. We've got 1/8 of an inch of old hardened grease sitting there causing the issue. So one of the things we're going to want to do on this one is to clean all of this off. And once we free that up, Scott's going to have a nice functioning reel. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a little bit of penetrating oil. I'm going to spray it here in the hopes that it'll loosen some of that up. get the click back in that anti-reverse. And while I do that, I'm going to let that sit for just a moment. And I'm going to pull down one of my containers, see if I can find one of those little line rollers that we might be able to find. So there's an awful lot of times, unfortunately, when a reel can't be saved any longer. It's just, well, it's beyond hope. And every now and then, what I'll do is I'll disassemble them like I have here. And that's probably close to what we're looking for. That one's maybe a little bit longer, I'm not sure. And of course, you're never sure on the diameter, the end of diameter. So I'm going to just see if I can find another one here. Kind of match the hatch, if you will. So just bear with me. I'm not seeing an obvious one to jump out. All right, well, we'll see if we can make that one work. It may be a little tight, it may be a little floppy, not sure, but it won't cut the line, and that's always what you're concerned about if you run it without that little line roller there. That'll dig in, and when it digs in, it abrades to the line itself, and well, that's the issue that we're trying to avoid. I'm going to take a quick look at another one. I have big line rollers in this one, but that's way too big. And there may just be another one running around in here. So as a point of note, if you're going to do this, it doesn't hurt to have that miscellaneous. Here's one here. This might probably a little too wide. Probably the right length. A little too wide for the stud. Okay, well, we got two candidates. We'll see what we can do. All right, so let's set that off to the side for a moment. And what we'll do next is we'll go back to the stuff that's been softening and see if we can't get some of this off and get this cleaned up. So I generally, that penetrating oil did a nice job to soften this grease up. What I will generally do on these is let them soak, let the product do its own thing. If you just spray it on and try to work it right off, well, you might have a little bit more effort required to get it done. I'm going to use that. Now let's take a cotton swab. When I do that, I leave a paper towel on my desk. And I like to do that just to keep that from transferring to the next project. All right, I'm just going to use a brush now to clean off. Inspect all of the teeth, make sure that they're in good condition, which they are. And we got a little bit of cleanup left on this side as well. So that did a nice job on the main gear. I'll wipe that down now with a fresh towel. This appears to be an aluminum gear, which was not unusual. It may be a pot metal gear. Kind of hard for me to tell that as it is. I'm going to just grease this up. Use fishing reel grease when you do your projects. Don't skimp. Don't use some kind of household grease just because it's convenient. Rather use the fishing reel grease. You won't regret it. It's designed for fishing reels, and it will make a difference. All right, we've got that all greased up. What we want to do now is get rid of this other pile of grease here. And that's one of the reasons why I wear this protective glove. I'm not quite sure how old the grease is, what the grease is, and what's in the grease, the contaminants that might be in there. So to me, it's worth covering up my non-working hand. I am right-handed by nature, but I have trouble when I try to use a glove on my right hand there. All right, I'm going to gently turn this over so that I can see if we've freed that spring up, and we have. That anti-reverse is working fine. I'm going to go back and reset that to the outbound side. I'm going to spray it one more time with that penetrating oil there. I'm going to let it sit just a little bit more. What I need to do next is to remove the crosswind block. That too was full of old grease. I'm going to fold this towel over so that I can trap the old grease and maybe have a little bit more use out of that. So we should have 2 screws in this crosswind block. We do, or at least we have 1. I just see the one below. Yeah, we have 2 screws. They're different size screws, it appears to be, so just pay attention. It may just be that this top one wasn't set in all the way. That's always a chance. This setup is very similar to the screwed crosswind block from a Mitchell. I think it's the Mitchell 324, if I remember. Very, very similar. These two just go into the main axle shaft. Just take your time, be patient with this stuff, and it will pay dividends in the end. And then I like to wipe that down and get that right into the parts tray so that I don't lose those 2 screws. Well, you can see that this cavity is packed with grease as well. What we're going to do next is we're going to pull that axle shaft out so that we can clean the balance of this. We're going to use another spray again. And we're going to just do a kind of a cleanup in aisle 7 sort of thing. If you can get that old grease out and replace it with fresh grease, this thing should really ride nice. Okay, got the main gear out of the way. Let's use this towel one more time just to clean that little bit out of the case there. Nice shiny brass insert there, that's nice. And we're going to go up top now and we will remove that nut that's holding on the rotor. To do that, you're going to need a deep socket. Looks like that's a 10mm nut. And I keep my sockets close at hand just for this purpose because I know that most of the time you're going to have to rely on them, particularly when you have a deep dish bowl like this one on the rotor. You're not going to be able to reach that with a standard open box end wrench kind of thing. All right, this comes off in the regular reverse side. I've lost the little washer on the side of that. I'm going to clean out the axle shaft. Place that into my bowl. Pull up on the rotor. And we don't have a bearing in here. We simply have a 2-step base. That's fine. You wanted to make sure that if you did have a bearing that you serviced it. And with the rotor off, then I will clean this up. Again, using the penetrating oil as a degreaser. Well, if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, if you want to leave that in the comments section, I do try to answer those questions that you ask. Well, with this off, I think now's probably a good time to see if we can do anything with this this one little line roller I have here. I'm hoping that this nut is enough length that it will accommodate the little change in the width of that piece. I'm going to turn this off now. I need to find the nut driver for that tail nut. Okay, we're back. I found it. It's a 1/4-inch nut driver. Or at least it's working on this, whether that's a 1/4-inch nut. It's kind of hard to say. And it looks like we have plenty of tail there that we can grab onto. So I'm going to put this replacement in. It doesn't look terrible. It should do the job. And we'll try to reset this so that we'll have a functioning bail. When you go to flea markets, you want to check for completeness on the reels. Something like this, well, could become problematic if you didn't have a spare part. As we said, it will tend to abrade, and if it abrades, you're going to break your line. Okay, we've got make some adjustments here, not much. Okay, well, I wasn't happy with the line lay of this. I went back to my parts bin and checked again, and I did find another one that seems more suited for that. So we're just going to continue to tighten this one down. We'll give it a little test, make sure that the bale fires. It's firing. I think we solved that problem. So these two can go back into my parts bin, and if I encounter that problem again, I will have an answer for it. Well, we mentioned that there are no burrings or bushings on this one. We're just going to grease this up a little bit where it'll ride inside the track. We'll grease the side of the shaft that comes up. And there's one more bearing here. We're going to push that out. It's not a bearing, I'm sorry, it's a collar that has the gear on the bottom of it. So we're going to push that up. We're going to make sure that these parts get cleaned. Bring back that paper towel. Check all the teeth, make sure that they're uniform. These are in good condition. Clean it out if you see any chunks of old grease in there. We're in good condition. And go get your grease brush and grease that up. And now we can put that back in. We'll load that in, push that down. Now we can set our rotor back on. There's the washer that goes on top of the rotor. We have that rotor nut. Find your socket. Hand tighten this as much as you can. You want to make sure that it's going on even. In this case, it wasn't going on even, so I backed it right out. And we'll just do it again. You want to have patience when you do this stuff. If you try to force anything, only bad things can happen. There we go. I've seen some reels come in that had broken parts that you would kind of wonder how you would ever break that part. And the answer was apparently it had gotten away somehow. All right, we should be able to spin this nice and easy. There you go, spins nice and easy. And now we can kind of rebuild the rest of the reel because it's relatively simple in this regard. Take your axle shaft, which you've cleaned, put a little bit of grease onto there, just enough to kind of see it, make it translucent. Don't overload it. If you like, you can put a little bit of grease into the channel where it rides. Again, don't overload. You'll wind up in conditions similar to what we had when we started this project. Through the gear, seat it, and then bring over the channel for the crosswind gear, or that acts as the crosswind. Two screws, I happen to have left one of them in there. You need to align the holes. So one end is good, and that'll help set it. And then I think what we saw with the other one was that it was not in all the way. It could just be it was a replacement screw. We'll find out. Kind of doubt it. So let's set that in. Yeah, that just wasn't tight. They're both uniform now. Okay, we've cleaned up this side plate, got all that old grease off of there. Just seems to be a little bit more right at this piece. Now if it was terrible, you could remove that anti-reverse dog. We're not going to do that here. A little bit of oil, same thing on the oil as with the greases, use fishing reel oil only. We've greased up our main gear drive. Let's go ahead and put that back in then. We can turn our attention to the other side. Put that handle back on. Now it certainly turns nice and easy now. And to mount this now, what you want to do is just put a little bit of grease into that track for the cross wind that's going to provide the oscillation. And when you go to mount, just mount your stud. This is an eyeball thing kind of, but make sure you look in. You see that the stud is aligning with the slot in that gear. And then hold your case while you set the first screw. So the Japanese trade reels were when the American industries were offshoring production of a lot of reels, and the first place they turned to was Japan because of the machinists who were over there, as well as cost savings from labor. Well, then Japan got expensive and they moved them to Korea, and then from there things kind of fractured, but you knew something was going on when you saw Daiwa reels and Shimano reels being made in Korea as opposed to Japan. And from Korea, well, Shimano went on to Malaysia, some moved on to Taiwan, and the majority moved on to China over time. And trade reels mean that the reel is kind of a generic reel built for the trade, usually retailers, and the reels pretty much follow a defined pattern. The disadvantage to trade reels is almost universally you cannot get parts or service on them. So just be aware of that if you are buying a trade reel. It comes at a cost, and the cost is it usually makes the reel disposable. In this case, this reel has stood the test of time. It's a nice reel, and we're going to keep it fishing. You want to remove that pentagon clip to service your drags. This is either going to be felt or Teflon or leather. It's got a nice drag set in it. It's pretty deep. All right, the first one is a toothed one. This appears to be leather, which again puts it probably towards the 1970s as opposed to the 80s. And leather is porous, so you want to use a grease on the leather. Fill those pores so that it keeps it flexible. And then that's enough grease, just a little sheen on it. If it's too much, you're only going to squeeze it out. So just be careful as you go do that. I missed by one. This little tension clip goes in. Now that washer goes in. Now the eared washer, we'll do this a second time. There's only 2 drags in this system. Then the top washer goes on. Now we can put that pentagon clip back in. Load that onto the reel. Now this reel just has one flat face on it, it's not 2. And you will line that up. Let's go put the adjuster back on now. What we want to do now is compress those, make sure that they're holding nicely, and then back them off. A quarter turn, half of a turn, just to take the pressure off, because that will act as a vise. All right, well now it's time to give it that final test, see how we did. Nice looking reel, good condition. It was missing a piece. We found a part that should substitute nicely for it. I have no idea what reel it came off of, doesn't matter. But we now have a line guide roller bearing, if you will. And look at the difference in the performance. Let's turn that over. Now you have a nice loud click that we didn't have before. That was grease choked. Make sure that the reel is turning nicely. It is. Tighten on the handle. And that's it. So Scott, you picked up a nice one. And now we can go fishing as it has a second chance. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. I do appreciate everything it is that you do. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, stay watching, and have a great time on the water. Good luck fishing. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.